Welcome back to Word Unlocked. I'm Jake.
And I'm Sarah. And today's word is one that quietly shows up in almost every area of life. In your brain, in your business, in your kitchen, and even in a courtroom.
It's one of those words that serious professional people use. You hear it in boardrooms, in science labs, in law offices. But once you understand it, you realize you actually need it everywhere.
It's not a flashy word. It doesn't demand attention, but it does something very specific and very important, and no other word does it quite the same way.
Sarah, what's the word?
Retain.
To retain. And by the end of this episode, I promise you, you will never forget it. Which is actually very fitting, because that's exactly what the word means.
Very smooth, Jake.
I retained that setup from last week's prep. Let's get into it.
So, at its core, retain means to keep something, to hold on to it, to not let it go. But here's what makes it different from just saying keep. Retain has a sense of effort behind it. It's not passive. When you retain something, you are actively holding on to it against the natural tendency for it to disappear, leave, or slip away.
That's the key distinction, and it's a really important one. Things naturally escape. Memories fade. Customers leave. Heat dissipates. Power gets transferred. Retain is the word you use when something is actively being held in place, when you're working against that natural drift.
And that's why it sounds serious and intentional, because it is. You don't accidentally retain something, you choose to, or you build a system that does it for you.
And it crosses so many different fields: education, business, science, cooking, law, which is exactly why we're going to go through each chunk one by one, because the word looks slightly different in every context, even though the core idea stays exactly the same.
Chunk 1, and this is probably the most personal one for everyone listening, is retain information or retain knowledge. This means to successfully remember things you have learned over a long period of time instead of forgetting them.
This one hits differently because we have all had this experience. You study something, you feel like you understand it, you go to sleep, and then you wake up the next morning and it is simply gone, like it was never there. Your brain just quietly let it go overnight.
That's because reading something once is not the same as retaining it. Your brain needs repetition, context, and connection to actually hold on to information long term. That's the difference between knowing something for a test on Friday and actually retaining it 3 months later when it matters.
And this is exactly why reviewing things regularly, coming back to vocabulary, coming back to notes, coming back to concepts, is the most effective way to make sure your brain actually retains the information. One read-through is not enough. The brain retains what it sees repeatedly.
Chunk 2. Retain customers, or retain users. Now we've moved from the brain into the world of business and technology. This is an extremely common phrase in startups, product teams, and marketing. It means keeping people buying from you or continuing to use your product, instead of them leaving for a competitor.
And this one is genuinely one of the most important concepts in any business. Because here's the thing. Getting a new customer is expensive. It takes advertising, sales effort, time, money. But retaining an existing customer, that's where the real value is. A customer who stays with you for 3 years is worth so much more than someone you spend a huge budget attracting and then lose after 1 month.
And in tech especially, user retention is one of the key numbers that investors and product managers watch very closely. If people download your app but leave after a week, that's a retention problem. It means something in the product is not giving them enough reason to stay. The interface, the value, the experience, something is failing to retain them.
And the lesson in that is simple. Retention is about consistently delivering value. The moment your product stops being useful, easy, or enjoyable, people leave. You have to earn the decision to stay every single time.
Chunk 3. Retain control. This is about power and authority. It means keeping your ownership or decision-making power over something, especially when external forces or circumstances are trying to take it from you.
This one comes up a lot in the startup world. When a founder raises money from investors, they're giving away a percentage of their company in exchange for funding. And if they're not careful, that process can slowly chip away at their ability to make decisions. They can end up in a situation where technically it's still their company, but they can no longer actually run it the way they want to.
So, retaining control means being strategic about how much you give away and to whom, and making sure the agreements you sign protect your ability to still be the one steering the ship. He sold a large portion of the company, but retained control over every major design decision. That is a very intentional and important line to hold.
And it doesn't have to be a business. In any situation where your authority over something matters, a project, a creative vision, a life decision, retaining control means you are the one who ultimately decides. Not the loudest voice in the room, not the person with the most pressure. You.
Chunk 4, and this one is a bit of a change of scene. Retain heat or retain moisture. These are phrases you'll hear in cooking, science, and gardening. They describe a material's ability to hold on to warmth or water instead of letting it escape quickly.
And this one is so practical and so specific. In cooking, if you use a thin, cheap pan, the heat disappears the moment you put food in it. The temperature drops immediately, and you end up with uneven cooking. But a thick, heavy cast iron pot, it retains heat incredibly well. It holds the warmth evenly and distributes it consistently. That's why serious cooks care deeply about what their pans are made of.
Same principle in gardening. Some soils retain moisture beautifully. They hold water after rain and release it slowly to the roots over time. Other soils let water drain straight through so fast that the roots never really benefit. If you want healthy plants, you want soil that retains moisture well.
It's the same word, same idea. Holding on to something instead of losing it, just applied to the physical world instead of the human world.
And the fifth chunk, retain a lawyer. Now this is in legal territory. This is a formal phrase that means to officially hire a lawyer by paying them an upfront fee called a retainer so that they are on standby and available to you whenever you need them.
And this one is important to understand because it's slightly different from just hiring a lawyer for a single job. When you retain a lawyer, you're essentially putting them on your team in advance. You're saying, I want you available to me before the problem arrives, not after.
And that's actually the smartest way to approach it. A lot of people only think about getting a lawyer when something has already gone wrong. A contract dispute, a business problem, a difficult situation that's already escalated. But by then, you're already on the back foot.
If you're starting a serious business, signing significant contracts, or entering any major agreement, retaining a lawyer before you sign anything is one of the best decisions you can make. You pay for their availability and expertise up front, and then they're there when you need them. It's not an emergency reaction, it's a preparation strategy.
Prevention over cure. That's the retain a lawyer philosophy. Okay, real life. Let's start with retention of information, because I have a very specific and slightly embarrassing story about this.
Please.
So, I was learning Spanish on my own for about 6 months, really committed, every morning for 20 minutes. And at the end of the 6 months, I felt great about it. Then I went on holiday, didn't practice for 3 weeks, came back and tried to have a simple conversation. I could not retain a single word. It was completely gone, like the 6 months had never happened.
The brain is ruthless. If you don't use it, it will quietly remove it to make space for something else.
And that was the lesson that completely changed how I approached learning anything. One session is not enough. 1 week is not enough. You have to go back, repeatedly, consistently. That's the only way the brain actually retains it long term.
Mine is about retaining customers, or in this case, completely failing to. A friend of mine built a food delivery app a few years ago. The launch went really well. Tons of downloads, great press, people were excited. But about 6 weeks in, the numbers started dropping. People were downloading, using it once or twice, and then never coming back.
What happened?
The checkout process had too many steps, 5 steps to confirm a single order. People got frustrated halfway through, abandoned it, and went back to whatever they were using before. The product itself was good, the food was good, the prices were good, but the experience was just awkward enough to lose them. He fixed the checkout, got it down to 2 steps, and retention improved significantly. But those first 6 weeks were a hard and expensive lesson in what failing to retain users actually costs you.
That is such a clear example. The product wasn't the problem. The experience was. And the experience is what determines whether people stay.
Exactly. And here's one about retaining control, which is very close to my heart. A friend of mine started a creative agency. Brilliant work, strong reputation, real demand. She brought in a business partner early on who handled the commercial and financial side, while she focused on the creative side. Sounded like a perfect split, but the agreement they signed wasn't clear enough about who had final say on major decisions. A year in, the partner started making calls about clients and pricing that she completely disagreed with. But because the agreement was vague, she didn't have a clean way to override those decisions.
She hadn't retained control properly.
Exactly. And it cost her 2 of her best clients and nearly the entire culture of the company she had built. She eventually renegotiated the partnership and got a much clearer agreement, but she always says the same thing when she tells that story. I should have retained a lawyer before I signed anything.
2 chunks in one story. Retain control and retain a lawyer.
Sometimes life gives you the whole vocabulary list at once.
And the lesson is, do it before you need it, not after. All right, let's bring this home. Retain. To actively hold on to something instead of letting it slip away. It sounds formal, it sounds intentional, and that's exactly because it is both of those things.
Your 5 power chunks. Retain information or knowledge, holding on to what you've learned. Retain customers or users, keeping the people who chose you from leaving. Retain control, keeping your authority and decision-making power over something that matters. Retain heat or moisture, a material's ability to hold warmth or water in cooking and science. And retain a lawyer, formally hiring legal support before you need it, rather than after.
Today's homework, and this one is very simple.
Think about one thing in your life right now that you want to retain. Maybe it's knowledge you've been building, maybe it's a habit, maybe it's a relationship, a skill, a standard you've set for yourself. What are you actively doing to hold on to it? Because retain is not a passive word. It asks you to do something.
And if the answer is nothing, that's your sign.
Thanks for listening to Word Unlocked. See you in the next episode.
Stay curious. Hold on to the good stuff. Later.